What is going on, everybody? Brutus on Baseball back with another live stream this week. Nina is still away on her cruise, so I don't have my edited computer, so we're going to keep on doing this. And it's actually fun. I don't know why there was a stumbling block for me to get live on YouTube. It's actually a quite easy way to share. I don't get to do all my editing and my graphics and stuff like that, so there will certainly be videos that I put together that go through the history of baseball in some way, team histories or baseball card history, history, free agency, things like that, that definitely will require more of a script and editing and a lot of stuff added to it. But in the meantime, this is an option for me to be able to keep coming to you and do it a little bit easier, less time consuming. So that's what I'm here for. So the big news this week, obviously, was the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement. There's been a lot of stuff going on around that. A lot of people talking about it. I've talked about it a number of times in the past, putting out videos of the top 10 players that I think are most likely to get into the Hall of Fame. And I've been fairly right on. Jeff Kent got in this week, this last year, I guess, for this year, and he's the one that I predicted that most likely to get in. So again, I think I hit the nail on the head with this one too. Carlos Beltran, I saw him going in. Andrew Jones, I wasn't sure if he was going to get in this time or in his last year next year, but he ended up getting the call this year. So pretty cool for them. Congratulations. I definitely would have voted for Beltran. I was always still on the fence with Andrew Jones. He just, I know that he was one of the best defensive center fielders of all time, but there's just something for me that I need a peak and a longevity put together. And it doesn't matter to me if you don't do as well, into your mid to late 30s. But as long as you have those years, and Andrew Jones was essentially done by the age of 31, I think. So that one was the tough one for me. So whether he not, he gets my support, he got into the Hall of Fame. So congratulations to both of them. So one of the things that I wanted to go through, and I'm going to be learning how to do this a little bit as we go, but I think I can share a screen with you guys. I wanted to just look at the voting results and just kind of go through some of the observations that I had. So when you guys see the voting results, this is the ballot tracker, obviously. Uh, there's some really interesting things that come out here. So the first one, Beltran sailed in pretty easily. Andrew Jones did actually quite better than I thought at the end of the day. These are the public ballots that are made available. So I don't know that these are the final percentages. They may be in there somewhere. I didn't look closely enough at what he's updated here. But there's definitely some interesting stuff going on here. The most interesting storyline here to me, it's kind of a two-piece, but it goes together, is Andy Pettit and Felix Hernandez. Both of those guys, I think, finished in the high 40 percentages. And that's really going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. A couple notes. Chase Utley, I think he got just under 60%. He's going to get in third ballot, third year on the ballot. And he's already up to almost 60. It's just going to take 2 years maybe, and he will definitely get in, maybe even next year, because there's going to be another soft ballot of first timers. So I'm not going to be surprised to see him get in. But Andy Pettit, I think this was his 8th year. He's creeping up to just under 50%. And that's going to be a fascinating case. We've seen a history lately, I guess, of players creeping up as they get later in their candidacies on the writer's ballot. It started maybe with Tim Raines, I think, got in on his 10th, Larry Walker on his 10th, Edgar on his 10th, Billy Wagner last year on his 10th. And Andrew Jones kind of did that creeping movement as well. So he got in on his 8th. He didn't have to wait the whole time. But we're definitely seeing a lot of players and voters vote more and more for these players as they reach the end of their careers on the ballot. And what's fascinating is I think that's a new thing. I think it's something that's happening in the last 10 years or so. And if you look back in time, uh, it's you see a lot of guys like Don Mattingly that stayed on for his entire time, and he stayed in the 20%. And most guys were like that. And it's very interesting to see how things are progressing for a lot of these players, that they just keep on going up and up and up. And I don't think that needs to be the case. I think there's some guys that should stay low. And we do see that with guys like Torrey Hunter and Mark Burley. But we're seeing it a lot more often where voters actually jump on a bandwagon more often than not. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But with Andy Pettit, and sorry, I'm juggling all this stuff with live stream for the first time. So, I see that I've gotten a couple comments. Feel free to comment and I'll try to interact as much as I can. That's awesome. So, hello, Otto Olson, same last name as me, Olson. But yeah, it's definitely a soft 2027, softer for 2026, even. At least we have Buster Posey next year. So, there's only one guy from 2026, first time on the ballot, that made it to a second year, and that's Cole Hamels. And I'll talk about him in a second. So Andy Pettit, let's finish up with him first. If he does end up getting to the 75% threshold in the next 2 years, which I'm not going to be surprised if he does, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with him and other PED players. For whatever reason, he's kind of given that pass of using PEDs, even though most other players don't. And I think that a lot of people see what his reaction to it was, what he admitted to doing. He kind of came out as, somebody that it's not a whistleblower because he didn't say something ahead of time, but he came out, and I don't want to say somebody that kind of ratted other people out, but he kind of did with Clemens in a little way. So it's interesting, he kind of came out and he admitted to it. He said when he did it, why he did it. He said he did it because he was injured and he wanted to come back sooner, and that's what PEDs helped him do. A lot of players probably have the same exact story. So just because he came out and admitted it, does that make him much different? I think uh, Mark McGuire, I think, is a guy that definitely had trouble staying on the field. And I think he probably used it. He hit 49 home runs in his rookie year. He didn't need to bulk up and get strength. He wanted to stay on the field. And he didn't come out and admit it just the same way that Andy Pettit did, but I think he did eventually come out and just kind of say, like, I made mistakes. So why don't we give him the same kind of pass as Pettit? It's interesting. Probably because he broke the record. That's the big difference. But um, for me, I don't see a big difference between Pettit and a lot of the other guys. And I think it's actually, I see him as less worthy than guys like Bonds and Clemens, because Bonds and Clemens had great careers. They were Hall of Fame players probably before they, quote unquote, started using PEDs. Andy Pettit is a borderline guy at best with his numbers. That's why he hasn't gotten the support. And he admitted to using PEDs on a number of different years to get back from an injury. So if he hadn't used those, imagine what his numbers would be. He wouldn't have been on the field to collect those numbers. And so why are we kind of giving him a pass, especially since his numbers are obviously inflated by PED use? The other guys might be too, but they had great numbers. Pettit has borderline numbers. So it's fascinating. No matter what end of that line, what side of that line you step on, how you feel about PED use, somebody that I'll vote for most of them. It was a thing of the era, and it is what it is. And baseball hasn't suspended them. The 3 suspensions for PED use and you're done. That's what I feel is the rule. And if you haven't been suspended by baseball, you're eligible and you should be voted for based on your record on the field. So that's how I feel about it. But whether you agree with me or not, having Andy Pettit get in within the next 2 years has got to have an impact on a lot of voters thinking on whether these other PED guys should get in or not. So that's going to be a fascinating one. And for a lot of people that want to see Bonds and Clemens get in, and other guys like McGuire, whoever, Sosa, you may actually want to be voting for it to get in, because having him get in may actually increase everyone else's chances that are associated with PEDs. So it's going to be interesting. And sorry, Otto, yes, I am an O, not an E. So I spelled it the right way. I'm just saying. All right. So um, getting to the next guy, Felix Hernandez is the other one that is just a fascinating story to me on this ballot. I think he finished, I can't remember if it was a little bit above, I think it was a little bit below Pettit on the final voting. But at the end of the day, his second year on the ballot, he's already close to 50%. And it's not what I expected because he had such a short career. He had a great peak, sure, but he didn't keep it going. And other guys that were similar, Johan Santana is a great example. Johan Santana had a really high peak, finished a little bit early, fell off the ballot, didn't even get a second year of acknowledgement there. I know he had the crowded ballot. It is what it is. This one's not crowded anymore. Maybe that's the difference. But having Felix perform so well, he's obviously on a trajectory. He's gonna get in at this point. I don't doubt it whatsoever. It may take him, another 3 or 4 years to get in, but he's gonna creep up and get there from what we've seen so far. So that's a fascinating storyline because if Felix gets in, I think that has got to open the doors for so many other pitchers. The voters out there, the writers, are obviously looking at starting pitchers differently already. The starting pitchers in today's game are a different breed. We've got Verlander, we've got Scherzer, we've got Kershaw that just retired. Those guys are kind of the last, maybe Chris Sale, of a dying breed of pitchers that came out and just were starting pitchers in the old sense of the word. And Felix fit into that mold as well. So I'm surprised that the voters are already looking at starting pitchers differently, but they definitely are. You can see it. And if we're going to be looking at starting pitchers differently in Felix's era, which really is, 2005 to 2015 is when he was in his prime, uh, how can we not look at other pitchers from that same type of era with that same light? So I think having Felix in is going to open the door for a number of players. You see it with Cole Hamels already this year. I did not expect him to get over 20%. I expected him to stay on the ballot, maybe, but somewhere between 5 to 10%. That one was interesting to me. But if Felix gets in, what about the other guys? Mark Burley is a great example. A guy that gets 20% of the vote, but if Felix, why not Burley? Maybe because of the peak difference. I'm not sure. But career value wise, Burley definitely has an argument if Felix is in. You have other guys that are no longer on the ballot. Johan Santana definitely has the peak that Felix had. And what about him? Does that Felix going in mean that Santana's got to go in at some point in my mind? Tim Hudson, Kevin Brown, these guys are guys that fell off the ballot right away, again, in that era of crowded ballots. But they have the career value that's even better than Felix and right up there with other guys like Cole Hamels, Andy Pettit. So if these guys start getting in, I think it opens the door for a lot more starting pitchers from that late 90s, 2000s, early 2010s era to get in as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over, my observations. If there's interest in this, who do I think is going to get into the Hall of Fame from this ballot that we see eventually? Abreu, I don't really think he's going to get in. I think that he could creep up a little bit higher, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that doesn't really get over 50%. Braun is off. Burley, I think it's too late in the gate for him. By the time that Felix gets in or anybody else, he's going to be getting to his 10th year already. So I don't think that that's going to happen. Cole Hamels, that's going to be an interesting one. If Felix gets in, I'm not going to be surprised if he's one of those guys that creeps up toward the end of his ballot time as well and gets in eventually. Torrey Hunter is going to languish. I love Torrey. He was such a great guy, great player, but he's just going to sit there in that, barely on the ballot area. Andrew Jones just got in. Who else are we looking at? These guys all fell off. Dustin Pedroia, second year, 20s. I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually gets in because I do think Chase Utley is getting in. And if Chase Utley gets in, that opens up an argument that's even better for Dustin Pedroia. Pettit, I have a feeling he is going to get in. I have a feeling he's going to get more and more support. And over time, a lot of those voters that maybe haven't been voting for him but do support the PED guys may actually start putting their votes in for him just for that reason. So I have a feeling he's going to sneak in at the end of his ballot time. Manny's off. A-Rod, I don't think will get in on the writer's ballot. I think eventually, a long way in the future, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame because this whole era is going to be seen differently once the dust settles. But it's not going to be on the writer's ballot. Francisco Rodriguez, I think he's one of those guys that is overlooked for whatever reason, whether it's people like him, his history of outside baseball. But I do think that he has an argument as one of the top saves leaders of all times and had a great career. So if you're letting other guys in, why aren't we looking as hard, especially when we're talking about like Aroldis Chapman and Kenley Jansen, and people are stoking them up for Hall of Fame candidacy, then how can we not be talking more about Francisco Rodriguez? But he definitely flies under the radar. Jimmy Rollins, I don't see him getting in unless there's a lot of late support. Chase Utley, obviously, he's going to get in. I think next year probably is when he's going to get in. If not next year, 2 years from now. Omar, he's going to be off. Too many off-field issues. And I've done whole, articles and videos about this. He's not the same defensive player as a guy like Ozzie Smith. Even though he's got the gold gloves, he does not have the defensive analytics to back it up. He was good. He was even really great, but he was not Hall of Fame defense in my mind. And he had no bat whatsoever. And then David Wright, I wish I could vote for David Wright. He just didn't do it long enough, but he's the type of guy you want to see in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think it's going to happen. It just can't happen. And yeah, Otto brought up a good point. John Lester, he's going to be first up in 2027. If you had asked me before this ballot came out, these results came out, I would have said no, not a chance. He's probably going to stay on the ballot for a couple of years at least, but I didn't think he'd have a chance. But now with all this, who knows? Maybe he actually will. So, yeah, that's my ballot. I will stop sharing that screen so I can kind of go big again. Cards. Let's get into cards a little bit because I love doing both. I love doing baseball, talking baseball history, but I love sharing cards as well. So, this one I've got, for anybody that is familiar, I've got the run. Let's not get the light of my my Carlos Beltran PSA 10 BGS 95 with the great subgrades and the SGC 98, so the old slab on that one. I find this one fascinating. Beltran, that's not Carlos Beltran. Most people know that now. That's Juan Lebron. And this was an error card. It was an uncorrected error. So sure, it counts as an error card, but it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's still considered Carlos Beltran's card. He's not pictured on it. How dissatisfying is that to have a Hall of Fame player on his first official mainstream card that's not even him? So I've done some thinking about this, and yes, it's his card. Most people have collected that as it's his card. Most of the PSA set registry for Hall of Fame rookie cards, future Hall of Fame rookie cards, that's the card listed. But I do think about this sometimes. Do I prefer to collect the card that has his picture on it or the card that has his name on the front and on the back? And my preference is actually to have the card that has Carlos Beltran's picture on it. I guess it depends. Like, do you collect for the player on the front, or do you collect for the set checklist? What the number and the player name on the back and the stats and everything. And it's a tough question. So in my mind, I've decided this past year, as I knew that he was probably going to get in, that you have to have both cards to really have the Carlos Beltran rookie card. That's my opinion. So I've picked up the Beltran and the Juan Lebron, and I'm keeping both of those because you can't have one without the other and claim to have the Carlos Beltran rookie card. So that's my thinking. Feel free to put in the comments afterwards or the chat like what your thoughts are. But it's an odd circumstance for a Hall of Fame player to have his first what's considered a rookie card, even though it would be a prospect card today. But what's considered his rookie card from 1995 to not actually be him on the rookie card. We have other ones that have done the same thing. Edgar Martinez, his 1988 Donruss rookies, same thing. But I've never really thought about it that much until Beltran. Maybe because Edgar had the Fleer, which is his more important rookie card. But it really made me think about it this time around. Andrew Jones, most of my Andrew Jones cards are in a vault, the Fanatics vault. Most of my big cards get sent there just because it's easier for me. I don't like not having them, but it's easier for me to ship them there, partly because I live in Vancouver. So getting it to Canada is harder. But most of them are in the vault there, so I don't have many to share. I do have the Bowman, again, BGS 95 with the quad 95 subgrades. I love that one. I do have the PSAs, and I've got the BGS 95 for both as Bowman's best. And I'm still looking for the SGC 10s for both cards. I didn't pick them up this year, and I'm hoping that once things settle, as prices come down a little bit more, I can pick those up. And then I've got tons of Jeff Kent rookie cards to share. But I'm not going to share them all. I'll just do a quick look. You've got the scores on the back. You've got the Pinnacle, the Leafs. Leaf is my favorite of his cards for the picture. got the Fleer updates, Donruss, things like that. But the one that I really wanted to show most is that 1992 Leaf Gold Jeff Kent. I've got a 10. I bought this 10 a long time ago. And prospecting for future Hall of Famers is the way to go. Because if I bought this, I don't know what it was now, but like 7, 8 years ago when I thought Jeff Kent eventually would get into the Hall of Fame. Uh, I don't remember what I paid for it, but I think it was more like $50, and they go for over 1,000 at this point. So that's how you can collect cards that appreciate over time. It's not by prospecting new stars in the major leagues, in my opinion. It's prospecting Hall of Famers well before they're actually there, and at a time in their career when they're having down career years or injuries or things like that. And it's still a bit of a gamble, but at least at the end of the day, if my prospect doesn't make it, he's still a solid, you know, major league star instead of some guy you never hear of again. So that's my opinion. I like to do that tag because it's a little less risky. And then the last thing I want to talk about today, there's been a lot of stuff going on around PSA, BGS, SGC. Uh, Junk Wax Hero put it out a good video where he pointed out Greg from Midlife Sports, um, a comment that he got back from the Collectors Universe, head grader, Ryan Hogue, I think is his name, saying that the set registries for PSA, BGS, and SGC will not be combined. So that was an interesting question to ask. If you're looking at all those under the same umbrella, would they be combined into one set registry so you could use your cards to compete? And the set registry is fun for collectors because they love to be able to have that community and compete against each other for the best set. And there's that element of competition to every hobbyist. I think they want to be able to own stuff like that. So I, I definitely think that if you, sorry, Otto, I saw your comment. It distracted me for a moment. Let me answer that. Yeah, that black gold for Jeff Kent, it's crazy how expensive that has gotten. And it's because those are really hard to find, not to get raw copies, but in good condition. Because I've opened up a lot of 1992 Leaf, and every black gold card you get, it seems like it's off center. Those black borders are just horribly chipped, the corners. And then the gold foil, like in the names and all around the border, is flaked off in a ton of them as well. So to get a 10 is really very hard. And I think that's why it has the market that it does. So it's interesting for sure. But let me get back to the set registry. So people love the set registry. They want to be able uh, to compete in that. And so combining all of the three grading companies into one set registry makes sense from a lot of collectors' perspectives. But from collectors' universe, having PSA as kind of that standalone brand that has this great set registry that I hear that they're going to be doing some upgrades on. I don't know if that's the front facing or the back end. I think the back end. But whatever it is, they want to keep the PSA brand separate and maybe kind of the elite brand for them, and have a tiered brand service. SGC has that vintage brand, of course, and BGS. It's going to be interesting to see how it falls out. So I'm not going to be too surprised if collectors keeps these actually separate and moves SGC to that vintage and moves BGS to TCG. That's what has kept BGS going for the last couple of years. Sports cards have declined for BGS. I think we're down to less than 5% market share. It may have been like around 3 or 4%. But at the end of the day, they kept alive because TCG. And it's all because of that black label, really, at the end of the day. Maybe the pristine label a little bit, the pristine gold, but that black gold, or sorry, the black pristine label is what kept them going. Because in a day and age when you have ultra modern cards, that a PSA 10 is the expectation, it's the baseline. If you get a 9, you've lost. PSA 10 alone isn't good enough anymore. So a lot of these people, especially in TCG, started going to BGS and kept going to BGS because they could get pristines and black labels to separate their cards out. And I've been banging this drum for a long time. PSA has got to get a pristine grade to be able to keep being relevant in the ultra modern hobby, because PSA 10s eventually people will realize that they just don't matter anymore. And if you don't believe in grading cards, I totally get it. I'm actually I can be on board with that. There's a lot of people out there that have just bought into grading, but I can understand just why it's so ridiculous to start talking about pristines and black labels as a difference maker when you can't see the difference. But we have to admit, for a lot of people out there, it doesn't matter. They are in the hobby. They know, hey, maybe I can't see the difference between my PSA 10 and your BGS black label. But at the end of the day, I believe that technology, AI, whatever it is, graders with huge magnification can see a difference. And that matters to me because I want the best card out there. And that means something still, whether you believe in grading or not, whether you believe in PSA 10s or pristines or not, it means something to enough collectors out there that it's going to be relevant. And PSA doesn't have that grade level. And it's going to be interesting to see if they just lean on BGS for that grade level, or if they'll start to consider using it the same way. So I don't know. Like it's going to be fascinating. And one of the things that I wanted to share before I close up, I've been exploring CGC a lot more often. I'm into graded cards. I like the set registry aspect. I like that CGC has a set registry. It's got a lot of work to go on it, but I like it. Um, but CGC, when I was looking through, they have this article, whatever you want to call it, on their grading scale, and they push for a single grading scale for grading cards. They think that there should be a universal. And again, this is one of those things that I've been banging on for a while. Back in the 80s, before grading, there was this, well-known accepted grading scale, the near mint, mint, whatever. That was what everybody agreed, and grading came into being because nobody could agree on whether that was a near mint or a near mint. So they wanted kind of a third party to be able to help them out, and that's why grading became what it became. But when we got into the grading, we've got BGS with their 9.5 gem mint plus pristines. We've got CGC and SGC that put the mint plus in there. BGS doesn't have the mint plus. They have their 10s as 10s and their pristines as gold labels. PSA has refused to do a mint plus. They've refused to do a pristine. CGC is really pushing, we should all have the same universal grading scale, so it makes sense, and I agree with that. I think some people say this is a company thing. They wanna go with the grading scale that separates them. I understand it, I get it, it's a marketing thing, sure, but it's not what I would prefer to see. I wish that I could compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges across the grading companies and make it make more sense. So for me, I think the SGC and the CGC grading scales are essentially equivalent, and that's the right one to use, in my opinion. I think the BGS, heard they're going to stick with their subgrades, but they're also going to stick with their 9.5 gem mint. When you have a 9.5, but it's got three 9.5s and a 9, that's a Mint Plus card. We need to all just kind of accept that when we're buying BGS. Look out for those. They're not full kind of quad 9.5 or above. And I've heard that even the quad 9.5s may be considered kind of that Mint Plus by some people, which I don't think is fair, but it is what it is. But I think that BGS and PSA should explore that Mint Plus grade, and PSA really should explore that pristine grade. That's what I would say as a collector. I'd like to see that. So it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out in terms of set registries, in terms of grading scales, subgrades, all that kind of stuff. It's put me on pause a little bit for what I'm going to do with all of my cards going forward. I've started to pick up some CGC. I was thinking for a while maybe crossing over some of my BGS and SGC because I just wasn't sure about their future. And I'm talking modern cards. SGC vintage cards I'm keeping. I'm keeping those in the holders. That's what they're good at. And it seems like that's what collectors wants them to keep doing. But for modern cards, I've been really slowing up buying anything BGS or SGC unless I have the thought that maybe this could cross over to another grading company that I don't have the same card in. So lots of food for thought, and if you don't collect graded cards or you don't believe in graded cards, none of that's for you, but it still impacts hugely the hobby that we're in. So that's it for me today. Thanks, Otto, especially for watching and joining in that conversation. I'd love to be able to, make these live streams more common, at least once a month, and have people join on and actually have conversations. And I'll get better at that, being able to kind of go between what I have that I want to say versus what people are commenting on. So that's it for me today. In the meantime, keep talking baseball. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you around.